Hi, I'm Jaden. I'm an incoming second year medical student at Leicester Medical School, and this is a video I very much wish I had when I was applying to Leicester Medical School and when I had that offer from Leicester Medical School. So in this video I've broken it down into 3 sections, and I've thought of a few useful questions that might be helpful towards you if you were in a similar position to me about 1.5 or 2 years ago. So let's get started. To start, what are the entry requirements for Leicester Medical School? So the last I checked, it was A-star AA, and the subjects required were Chem or Bio with another science. And how they assess applicants is they score them out of 64. 50% of that score is based on the academics and 50% of their score is based on the UCAT. So if you have, for example, good IGCSE grades or GCSE grades and a good UCAT score, it's definitely worth applying to Leicester because you would have an advantage there. And if your score is high enough, you'll be invited to an MMI interview, which is your last hurdle to getting that offer from Leicester Medical School. I also want to add, if you do have predicted A-level grades, that's when they use your IGCSE grades. But if you already have received your A-level grades, then they'll use your A-level grades to score you out of 32 for the 50% academic section of how they score applicants. So the next question is, how is the course structured at Leicester Medical School? So first, they have phase 1, which lasts for 2 years, and that is your preclinical years, and where you get most of your foundation and knowledge to become a doctor. And then after phase 1, you move into phase 2, which is your clinical years and lasts for about 3 years, and that's where you are placed in hospitals, where you have your hospital placements and you learn alongside your experiences with patients. So that is mainly how they structure the course broadly, but whenever they teach you the content and the clinical skills and whatever skills you need to become a doctor, they basically revolve around themes they've set out on their website, and this is basically how they provide you the tools so you can become the best doctor you can be. So what modules did I take in my first year? So I'll put them up here, and basically you do half of the modules in your first semester and half of the modules in your second semester, and it'll be the same for my incoming second year. And I just want to add, I think few of my favorite modules of my first year were definitely CVS, MEH, and musculoskeletal system, so MSK. So a good question is, what's Leicester Medical School known for? So I remember when I was applying, one of the selling points was that Leicester Medical School has full body cadaveric dissections. And right now I feel, in retrospect, I feel that it's not really a selling point anymore because a lot of other medical schools have it, but that's something you should check. Another thing that stood out to me and I thought was quite interesting was that because I learned it in A-level biology, I still remember the 6 markers for genetic fingerprinting, but yeah, so already a clue there, but genetic fingerprinting was founded in Uni of Leicester, so I thought that was quite interesting. That's something you can bring up in your interviews as well to show your interest. But other than that, Leicester Medical School is also known for its medical research. I think in 2021 it came up 2nd in the Times ranking, and it overtook Leicester. No, sorry, not Leicester, but Oxford. And yeah, Leicester Medical School was quite proud of that. I remember our intro lecture, they kept mentioning that, but I thought it was quite cool, and I think that correlates to how many research centers we have. I'll put them all up here, and I'll talk about, there was a recent research center that opened up. It was the Stonygate Empathetic Center. To be honest, I haven't been to any of these research centers because I think in your first year you don't get much exposure to research, but I'm hoping when I go back in December I get to see all these research centers, especially the new one at Stonygate. So what are cadaveric dissections like at Leicester Medical School? So in Leicester Medical School, basically you share one cadaver with your study group for phase 1. And in my first year, basically what we did was, in semester 1 we didn't get many dissections, but we had one to skin the cadaver, our cadaver, so that we could prepare their body for further dissection of their muscles in the upper limb and lower limb, so that we could learn the content for the musculoskeletal system. But I still remember my first cadaveric dissection experience. You go down into the basement of Morris Shock building, and basically you wear your lab coat, you put on your gloves, and then you put on your lab glasses or safety goggles, and then you see about I think it was 32, like exactly, but it doesn't matter, but like cadavers lined up along the dissection room on what looks like post-mortem beds, and I think they are post-mortem beds, but it was a really cool experience, and to be able to see a cadaver for the first time was amazing. To use their bodies for your own learning is also a really amazing and humbling and also privileged experience. So this is something you should definitely look forward to. Other than that, I also want to add that it's definitely not, whilst it's really good for your learning, it's definitely not an accurate representation of someone in real life, because a cadaver is dead and a person moving about still with their heart beating is someone who's alive, so it's still completely different. But I still remember at times I felt like the dissections were quite useful, but other times maybe not if you don't prepare properly. And that's because you don't get to bring any of your resources unless they're like paper down into the dissection room, and that's understandable because of confidentiality issues. So yeah, that's one interesting point to bring up. At times I feel that it would have been more useful for me to be in the library, for example, and looking through the 3D models online, because you have a lot of those resources out there, such as Complete Anatomy, where you can use a 3D model to see all the muscles in the human body. But it's always good to also see it in real life, because we are also assessed that way in our IUA, which I will talk about a little later. So how are my day structures in my first year? So basically you have these 4-hour blocks, which were made of 2-hour lectures and 2 hours of group work. And basically these 4-hour blocks are based on one module every day. So basically throughout your whole week, Monday, Tuesday, Friday, where did I skip that? Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, each day you do one module, and that'll be a 4-hour block. And after that 4-hour block, you might have supplementary lectures or group activities on things like interprofessional education, HEP, so Health Enhancement Program. That's like the equivalent of a self-care module in Leicester Medical School, and also CHDD, which is for your consultation and communication skills. Where was I most of the time in my first year? So I felt my second home was the GDC, and that will be the same for anyone who will be studying medicine at Leicester, and that will be true for phase 1. But in phase 2, I guess you'll be less in the GDC because you'll be out in hospital placements. So yeah, other than that, it's only when you have dissections that you would have to go down to the basement in Morris Shock building, which is just next to the GDC. Other times the rooms or the lecture halls might be booked up for other students in the GDC, so you might have to move around in the other buildings in the campus at Uni of Leicester. So what is group work like, and what does it involve in Leicester Medical School? So after 2 hours of lectures, that 4-hour block, after you take a break, then you move into your group work rooms, which fits about 32 people, and a CTF, clinical teaching fellow, or you could say your tutor. So basically you share a room with 3 other study groups, and within this group work room you basically work on an activity or a few questions set by your unit lead for a certain module. when you go through the activity, you can, whenever you're stuck, you can ask for help from your tutors because they will either have the answers and the explanations for it. So do I like how medicine is taught at Leicester? And my answer to that is definitely a strong yes, and that's because I really like how they have an integrated approach. So you have three main approaches: the problem-based approach, the integrated approach, and the traditional approach. And that's something you can search up on to see whether it's suited for your learning style. And for me, I felt the integrated approach was suited to me because that mixed method to learning helped me stay, I guess, focused because one, it was fun, it kept things fun and interesting. So that's what I really like about Leicester, how they have that 4-hour block, 2 hours of lectures to get the content in, and then 2 hours of interactive group work with your study group to discuss questions and talk about certain topics. The next question is, what sort of early clinical experience do you get in your first year? And that was one of the selling points when considering Leicester Medical School, I remember when I applied. So I feel like the overall assessment of what I had was that we didn't have much clinical experience, but I thought that wasn't necessarily a bad thing, because if you went into clinical experience without a lot of knowledge, you wouldn't be getting much out of it, because you wouldn't know, for example, how different conditions link to each other, different medications patient takes, and you wouldn't be able to appreciate the doctor's work. And it would be sort of similar to probably the shadowing experience you got to help apply to med through UCAS back then. So basically in Leicester Medical School, what they have is this thing called Patient Knows Best, which is done in semester 1, which is where you interact with a patient through an app called Patient Knows Best online, and you talk to them about their chronic long-term condition. So that's how that was where you learned how to talk to a patient professionally through online means. Another program or module we had was the NHS Healthcare Certificate, and basically this is part of Leicester Medical School's course where they train you to be able to work as a healthcare assistant. So I thought that was quite good. We had to do e-modules, we had to go attend some little workshops to learn certain clinical skills that are required of a HCA and be able to, I guess, appreciate people in the NHS staff workforce as well, other than doctors. So that was quite good. And basically our only real clinical experience we had was at the end of our second semester, or basically third semester, where we had 5 days worth of clinical experience, 3 days at the GP practice and 2 days at a hospital to sign off the competencies required so that we will be able to get an offer to work as a healthcare assistant. How are you tested at Leicester Medical School? So there are 4 main types of assessment. The first being your SAQ, which is the short answer questions, and the SBA, which is your single best answer questions. So those are like your MCQs, multiple choice questions. And third is your IUA or IUPA. So IUA stands for Integrated Understanding Assessment, and IUPA stands for Integrated Understanding Practical Assessment. So that's similar to your single best answer assessment, but this time it involves pro sections. So pro sections with flags in them. So you're given a sheet of paper with questions on them, and basically you select answers based on the flags on the pro section. So a pro section is just like a part of a cadaver, and that's used for learning, but in this setting you're using it for examination. So the difference between the IUA and IUPA, so I did the IUA in my first year, I will be doing the IUPA in my second year. The difference is that the IUPA involves you talking to the examiner and explaining your answer, whereas the IUA is written like the SBA. And your last type of assessment is the OSCE, which you probably heard of because it's used in almost all medical schools, and that is like your MMI interviews basically, where you are tested on your consultation skills and history taking and examinations and etc. I also want to talk about how there are two types of assessment. It's separate from the 4 types of assessment, but you have formative and summative assessment. Formatives are basically like your mocks, and so your summatives are what contributes to whether you can progress to the next year or whether it contributes to basically your final grade. On to the next section of this video, accommodation and transport. Just to give you a bit of context, there are basically 2 sites for student accommodation at Uni of Leicester, and that is the city, which is right next to the campus, and the village, which is in OP. So that brings me to my next question, which is, what is the best accommodation and which has the best reputation? So I feel the general consensus is that Freeman's is the best accommodation based on what a few of my friends told me, but I feel like that's a bit biased because a lot of my friends are in the city. So Freeman's is an accommodation in the city, and I think few of the reasons why it's quite good for student accommodation is its convenience, because it's like a 10-minute walk to the GDC, really close, 5-minute walk to the campus itself, and it's also close to your grocer. It's quite newly built, so the facilities are quite new, the rooms look really nice, your kitchen and common room look lovely, so there are a lot of perks about staying in Freeman's, but one caveat is that it correlates to how much it costs. It's one of the most expensive compared to a lot of other accommodations. But that being said, I've also heard some good things about Nixon. Okay, and now you're probably wondering, where did I stay in my first year? So I stayed in the pavilions in the village, and I felt like the village for me was really nice because it had a really homey feel, because OB is in a residential area, and whenever I went for my runs, it was quite nice because the area is really beautiful. You have the botanical gardens really close to you, which is something you should definitely visit if you're a uni student at Leicester. One of the other things about the village is that it's close to the Roger Bettel Centre, which arguably is a better centre than the Daniel Brown Centre, which is the sports centre in the city. One thing that made it convenient for me was that whenever we had tennis trainings, it was at the Roger Bettel Centre, so it was like a 5-minute walk for me to go training. However, the few problems I had with the village was mainly, I'll say the main problem first was the commute, and that's because you have to take a 15-minute bus to uni, and sometimes that wouldn't be so reliable, and at peak hours it can take longer than 15 minutes. So that's why I resorted to cycling in my first year. But I feel like they've improved on that throughout the year because of multiple complaints from other students as well. So hopefully next year it wouldn't be so bad. Other than that, it's also worth mentioning that the village accommodation is much older than the city accommodation, compared to Freeman's especially. You have some old city accommodation, but the village looks much older. So the room I had was this. I just put a video up on it, and I had a really spacious toilet, but everything seemed quite old. The kitchen also felt quite old. So I guess that you could look at it as a downside compared to other accommodation in the city. So that's something worth considering. What is transport like in Leicester? So there's not much of a train system in Leicester, so you have to rely on the bus system, and personally I feel like that's not so great in Leicester. It's not so convenient for students, but other than that, it's either you go on foot, or you cycle, or you take an Uber, or you go by car. So one of the things that I'm preparing to do for next year is to get my license so that I can drive around Leicester to make things more convenient for me. On to the next section, and the first question is there a lot to do at Leicester? So my answer to that is there is a lot of things you can do if you make it out to be. So Leicester is relatively small compared to a lot of other cities, but I feel like it has all the basic things a city has for you to have fun. And on top of that, at Uni of Leicester you have your LASUMA, which is the Association for Medical Students, and Leicester Student Union, which is the student body for the whole of Uni of Leicester. And basically they have many societies which host events on a weekly basis. So I feel like you'll never run out of things to do at Leicester. The question is, what is the nightlife like at Leicester? So to be honest, I can't answer that question because I didn't go often in my first year. But I know that there are two main, I guess, clubs students go to, and that is the O2 and Mosh. O2 is our own underground uni club, which is underneath the Student Union building, or Percy G building. And I've been to the O2. I thought it was quite lively and nice. Although I think I went one night and I felt that it was quite dead. But it's quite nice when we have those theme nights where, for example, we had ABBA night. I saw one day we had a Shrek night, and basically we have all these artist nights, Justin Bieber night, Taylor Swift night, and all that stuff. So it can be quite fun. But I can't give you a good answer because I don't know how it will compare to the nightlife in other cities because I haven't really experienced that. But I know it's particularly fun, especially on Wednesday, sports night, because that's when everybody goes after the intervarsity games. The next question is, should I attend all the fresher events? And my answer to that is definitely yes, because they are great opportunities to make new friends and make new connections. And what makes it even better is that everyone is probably in a similar situation to you, where they are in an unfamiliar environment and they're probably new to the city as well. But that doesn't mean you should get the bands where you get to go to all the events, because they can be quite expensive. You might want to keep it flexible because who knows, someone you met a few days ago might ask you to go out tomorrow, or that friend group. So yeah, I think it's good to keep it flexible, but again, it's really good opportunities to make new friends and meet new people. The question is, what is sport like at Leicester and what are the facilities like? So I'll just put it out there first. Leicester is not a sports university, so it's not the best for sport, but I feel like based on the facilities they have and the teams they have at Leicester for example, basketball, football and tennis, we're not too bad. It's quite decent in terms of sport. Facility-wise, we have many facilities that accommodate for a variety of sports, including tennis, badminton, basketball, football, rugby, fencing, and the list goes on. So if you want to pursue sports in Leicester, I wouldn't be too worried, especially if you want to do it as a side hobby. And if I were to talk about gyms, basically Leicester has a gym in the city and a gym in Oadby. I feel like when I first came into Uni of Leicester, I was hoping for those crazy US uni type of gyms where you have like 10 squat racks, but that wasn't the case. It's much smaller than that, but I think it's good enough to meet your personal goals, especially since they renovated the gyms in Uni of Leicester during my first year, so the equipment is brand new. Final question is for those of you who are confirmed going to medical school and you're going into your first year, and those of you who are confirmed going to Leicester Medical School, which I look forward to seeing you on campus. And the question is, what should you expect in your first year? And me being completely honest, my first year was a complete shock because one, I had to deal with the amount of volume thrown at by medical school and the pressures of it, alongside learning to take care of myself and be independent. And I guess me looking back in retrospect after first year, that whole of first year was a year of adjustment, trying to learn the right study techniques, learn how to cook, learn how to balance your time in terms of your social life, academics, and also fitness and all that stuff. So yeah, it can be quite tough, but I've thought of 3 tips that might be helpful towards you before you start your first year of medical school. So these 3 tips are quite general because it's difficult to imagine what first year is like until you probably only experienced it. So the first is always have a growth mindset. So by having this approach, you're trying to improve day by day, and I feel like that would take you very far, especially in medical school, because that involves adaptability and learning how to deal with change and adapt to it and keep pushing forward and growing. So that's one. The second is always ask questions, be inquisitive. You're there to learn. You're there to learn from experienced people. Don't be afraid as well, because one, you're paying them a lot of money to, I guess, learn, and two, they probably would have been in your own shoes as well, so they'd be very willing to help. And my last tip to you guys is work hard, play hard. And I always say that, but I guess that's how you'll keep sane in med school. So that's it for the video. Thank you so much for taking time off your day to watch it, and I hope that has been helpful. If you'd like to follow me on my med journey and you're looking for some tips on life in general, fitness, cooking, med related stuff, give me a follow in my socials down below in the description. And if you have any more questions, put them in the comments below and I'll respond to them as soon as I can. But till then, I'll see you guys again.